What you see here are the beginnings of my metal fittings for the landing gear. These two metal fittings that you see here are for the inside of the gear legs, where the two gear legs come down and meet the white ash block right by where the axle lays. In the foreground here is my template that I had made out of my usual cardstock. This was derived a little bit from the plans, but basically it's a modified design because this dimension here had to fit the block that I made, and then these dimensions here had to fit the actual wood legs themselves at the angle that my particular wood legs ended up being. And then I don't know if you could see it in the video or not. These indications here are just where I've decided to locate the bolt holes, and the holes for the these two holes here are for the 3/4 inch, I don't know what you want to call them, the tubes, the 3/4 inch tubes that go from the left side of the plane over to the right side. So after I got the template made to fit the block and to fit the legs at the proper angle, then I went ahead and made these two brackets. And as I said, these are the inside brackets because I found out after the fact that this template is only good for the inside. The outside bracket's going to be slightly different. So since I made this first, I'm just going to go ahead and make these. And next up, I got to get these angles bent to match the block and the individual legs. Once I get those angles correct, I'm going to C-clamp these together with the legs themselves, and then start trial fitting to the fuselage. And if that works out satisfactory, then I'll go ahead and drill these and the legs, and then I'll start making up the template for the outside brackets. Here is one of my ash blocks for the landing gear, and this is one of the templates I had made. Now this template is for this side of the block. This is what I call the small side of the block because this dimension here is smaller compared to the other side, which is quite a bit bigger. And that's because of all the weird angles that I had cut the block at when I made them. So this face is long and skinny, and this face is not quite as long and a little bit more fat. Now, I had already made this template for this side of the block, and I'm using this hole. I'm not going to be using. This is actually going to be moved. But these three holes are the ones that I'm using, and I've already got two of the holes drilled into the block. Now, when I flip this over, and I needed to make the template for this side, the template has to be quite a bit smaller lengthwise. As you can see, if I take my existing template and put it on, you can see how much it overhangs. However, since I've already got the holes drilled through it, I have to maintain these holes. So I had to make up another template. So this is my template for this side of the block. And this goes on this way. Now, if I can come back, well, let's see. Let me explain this first. Because of the way that the holes end up falling on this block, this template has to be made a little bit different in the fact that this one I had it so that it would not come to the ends of the wood. So the metal bracket does not come all the way out to the end of the wood. And it was the same with these legs. These legs are skinnier than the actual wood piece. Now I wanted to maintain that same kind of look with this template. And I'm able to keep the leg dimension for the metal the same as this template. So this width and this width on all four legs is the same. But you can see how I had to make this curve out here and curve out here. The reason for that, what I would have liked to have done was to continue this all the way down like you see I had drawn with the pencil and cut this off. And same here, just continue this all the way down and cut it off. And it would be more like this, where it just continues down all the way like here. But if I would have cut this off, you can see how close to the edge the hole would have been. This hole is represented here. When I flip the block over, you can see how much closer to the edge the hole actually is on this side as compared to this side. So if I would have cut this off, that particular hole would have been this close to the edge, which I did not like. So I decided to keep this template as big as this entire piece of wood here, so that I've got this good edge distance. And it would have been the same here. If I would have cut this off here, this hole has not been drilled. The two holes that are represented on the block are this one and this one. So this one I can put wherever I want. And it's already a little bit closer to this one than I'd like it to be. And if I would have cut this off, this hole would have had to been moved over. So what I elected to do then, to maintain this edge distance that's already here, and so that I would not have to move this hole over any closer, I just decided to make the template the same size as the wood block, like you see here. And then I decided to neck down the legs here and here, where they attach to the wood legs of the landing gear. So like I had said, the leg dimensions are the same, and these hole locations for the legs on this template and this template are the same. The only difference is I had to make this bottom part a little bit different, because this face of the block is a different size and a different shape than this face. So now I've got my outside template for the block made. Like that, and of course it will get folded over to match with the legs, and then the holes on this template will match the holes for the legs on this template. So a very long-winded explanation, but that's what happens when you start making blocks that are shaped the way this one is shaped. And I'll explain that once I get the leg together and get the brackets and everything put on it. It will be clear why it was cut the way that I cut it. Here is what I believe to be finished landing gear white ash block. This is the block that the bottom of the two gear legs attaches to. Again, you can see that it's cut in multiple angles, and again, that will make more sense when I get the gear assembled. I'll explain the hole in a minute, but you can see that it's got the multiple angles. Now I haven't finished drilling it yet for the fittings, because I just made the outside fittings for these blocks, and I have to finish drilling the holes into this when I get that in position and aligned with the rest of the gear. But aside from a couple of holes and some stain and varnish, I believe this block is finished. This is the black rubber cushion that I epoxied in place. After it was epoxied in place and dried, I cut it even with this angle here. and I cut it flush across the back the best that I could. It's not perfect, but it works. And then of course I had to come back and drill back through this hole to put the hole in the block here, or in the rubber. So that hole, if you can imagine the axle sitting through here, I'm going to weld a 3/8 inch rod to the axle, and it's going to drop down through this hole through the block, and it will protrude out the bottom. I haven't decided how much yet, but that is just to keep the axle located when you're taxiing, landing, takeoff, whatever it is, and the axle is springing up and down with the bungees. That pin will just help locate it, and it also prevents the axle from spinning. You only want the tires and the wheels to roll on their bearings. You don't want the axle to be spinning in here. So I'm just going to weld the pin onto the axle, drop it down through these holes, and of course you've got the metal plates bolted on either side of this, so there's no fear of that getting torn out one way or the other, or out this way from axle rotation. So that's what the hole's for. I think it's a clean installation, simple to do, and that's what I decided to use. So here's the block with the rubber insert. I've got to do the other block. I did put the rubber on the other block same time I did this one, but it didn't hold. I got to use some more epoxy. I got to quit being stingy with the epoxy, but this one seemed to hold up really well, even after sawing it across here and sawing it across here with a small hacksaw and drilling the hole through it. It still held, so I'm pretty confident it will stay in place. Once installed on the airplane, it can't go anywhere because it will be held in place with the pin that will be through here that's welded to the axle, and the axle itself will be on here. So it really can't go anywhere. If the epoxy were to break loose, it can't physically come off of the block. So that's where I'm at so far. I'm going to start fitting the outside fittings that I had made. Actually, let me go to those real quick. I've got them laid out here because I just took a picture of them. So these are the fittings that I spent about 6 hours yesterday getting these made. These are going to be the metal straps. There's 8 of them here. There'll be 2 of them will be welded together. And these are the straps that make up the attaching point for the lower wing strut. And these will get put through these slots on these brackets. These are the forward and aft gear brackets up at the fuselage on the outside of the gear legs. And like I said, the slots are for these wing strut attached fittings to poke through. And I've got those on both sides for both landing gear. These are the outside V brackets, and you can see that they're relatively odd shaped, but that will make more sense when I get them mounted. These are ultimately going to be the inside L brackets. These will end up being 90-degree brackets that go on the inside of the fuselage that bolt to these. And of course the various templates that I always make prior to making my flight hardware. So now I'm going to start fitting all this back together, drilling some holes and tweaking it, and see what I get. These few pictures coming up here basically show the cardboard template being made for the metal brackets to attach the legs to the ash blocks. What you can't see in the photographs are the reference lines I have drawn on the table that I fit the legs to. And then once I have the legs in position, I go ahead and start drawing up the cardboard template, both from the plans and custom fitting the template to the legs themselves in the position that they're going to be mounted to the fuselage. So I go ahead and full width the template and get it fitted and measured and drawn and cut so that it matches the legs. You can see that I've got all 4 gear legs here in place. I just wanted to pair them up to make sure that the legs from the left side match the legs on the right side of the fuselage in both length and width, and the angle cuts and all of that. So that's pretty much how I work the templates. Just work them slow and make sure everything is laid out correctly, and make sure that they fit the legs, both the angles and the lengths and widths. These next few pictures hopefully will help explain why I cut the ash blocks the way that I did with the compound cuts. Of course, once you're happy with your templates, you transfer those onto the steel and cut the steel. And then of course you'll have to do some trial fitting to get the steel bent to the proper angle to hold the legs to the ash blocks with very little gap between the wood pieces. But what I wanted to show mostly was if you look at the gear legs, and if you can imagine those gear legs to continue on through the ash blocks, I cut the angles on the ends of the ash blocks to match the contour, I guess, if you will, of the gear legs. So if the gear legs were to continue on through the ash blocks, it would all be a seamless kind of straight line drawn down from the edges of the legs down past the edges, the front and rear edges of the ash blocks. Now maybe I haven't explained that great, or maybe the pictures just stink, but that was the idea on cutting the ash blocks the way that I cut. And you can also see in this picture the hole that was drilled for the anti-rotation pin that will get welded to the axle.